Hey guys, it's me. It's Christina Lovisa. Let me turn the camera so I can say hi. Hey there. Here we are in week 2 of Open Studio. So if you're just joining us for the first time, hi Denise. Welcome. And if you're just joining us for a bit of curiosity, what's going on? I talk about creativity and share with you some live painting as I am doing these open studio videos. So it is my pleasure to welcome you to Hello Art Studios. This is studio space in Ottawa where you can see I have all my stuff spread on the common space table. Hello. And what we're doing in these videos, or what I'm doing in these videos, is getting you to pull out your art supplies. Hi Maria. Getting out your art supplies and welcoming you to create alongside me. So last week I had started a painting and then I was going to finish it. And because Saturday was my birthday, I decided to stay in the studio all day and treat myself to a full studio day, which meant I finished the painting that I had been working on because it just wouldn't leave me alone. So here's a quick little follow-up on that painting. Here it is complete. And I think where we left off was that I had a piece, I said I was going to add some collage to start telling the story of it. And it was interesting because I can show you what happened. The very first piece I put in was this sort of moon shape, crescent moon shape with or half moon shape with some branches and some birds on it. And it sits in the same spot that I had sort of delegated as the horizon, and then the bottom was all white. But you can see all the scratches and all the marks are still there, and all their glory and all those layers that had been created previously are now part of this painting. It's not like I started over or put gesso on the whole thing and decided that it was, time to start over. It was just worked on. So the background has lots of great scratch marks and layers and everything else. And I think I'm ready for wax on this piece and also on these ones. So then I started working on 2 others, and so these are pictures of 2 sheep that we spotted way high up in the mountains when we were in Jasper. And I climbed out of my sunroof and took a picture of them, and there was 2 of them side by side. So of course here's his buddy, and so there they are. They're very whimsical. They have wheels for feet or under their feet. They have some fun collage. They also started out with lots of collage, as you can see underneath. Those are the underside layers, I guess we can call them. And then building on top with collage, and then lots of paint, and then more collage. And the way I paint is a lot of standing back and assessing so I make intuitive marks and I think, yeah, that was it. And then I stand back and I look at it, and maybe it wasn't the right thing, or maybe it just needed to be calmed down a little bit. But at the end of the day, I love these little sheep. I say little, but they're actually kind of small paintings for me. I think they're 30 or 32 by 32. I just think they're adorable. So yeah, so getting back to this one, it is ready for wax, I think. So because I'm late today, you can see the disaster I got going here because I left so late on Saturday. I'm going to give you a little behind the scenes tour. We're going to go into my actual studio and I'm going to plug in my wax and get ready for another waxing day. So I'm also going to have to grab my microphone at some point soon, because once I turn on the ventilation in here, you can see my disaster. Once I turn on the ventilation in here, it's going to be hard to hear one another. So here's my table with all my papers. Going to clean that up. Here's a little pan of the studio, and you can tell that mess doesn't really bother me. Yeah. Anyway, so enough of my mess. I'm sure you all have your ways of working and creating too, but this is my super messy way of working. So I am going to make sure that the ventilation is on soon. Move my vent right on top to make sure that we get the right parts venting, and yeah, so that's all set to go. Now I need to make room on my table, and I'm just going to put the camera down for a moment. Hi, Sophie. I'm getting set up to do wax today. So hi, Dulce. So because I'm doing that, I'm just going to put the camera down for 2 seconds. I'm going to give you guys a chance to go and get whatever it is you are working on. Remember, the purpose of these studios is not just to watch me work. It's to get you guys creative as well. So I do have a topic for the day, but I'm going to save that for 2 minutes from now. I'm just going to go get my whatever you call the thing, microphone. I'm going to get my tripod, and I'm going to, thanks Heather. It's a mess, isn't it? I'm also going to get the painting. So it is time to get to work here, right? So Monday, fresh day, fresh from the weekend. It's funny how days keep blurring into one another now, but this too shall pass. I'm going to tell you guys about my, hi Joanne, I'm going to tell you guys about my endeavor that I started on the weekend, and by this afternoon I'll be launching it. So I have several things to talk to you about, but give me 2 minutes and I'll be right back. Ventilation going on. Hey, Karen. All right. Okay, as soon as I hook up this microphone, you guys should be able to hear me. Hi, John. Nice to see you. So, for those of you who are new to our group, you don't need to stick around the whole time if you don't want to. What we're doing, though, is I am encouraging people to be creative in this bizarre times we find ourselves in. And for me, art and creativity is what keeps me busy. Not only keeps me busy, but keeps me hopeful and keeps me purposeful day to day. So I know a lot of you, because I know Jean, I know Karen, whose jobs continue to be essential, and so maybe you haven't noticed a huge difference in what's going on, but there are many of us who teach and who earn a living by being more public, I suppose, and non-essential. And since that's all come to a bit of a grinding halt, now we're turning to looking at more creative endeavors. So my open studio, is to welcome people in to their own creative spaces, whatever that may be for them. So whether it's, pulling out any kind of a creative project or a craft project or something you've always had in the back of your mind that you meant to tackle, now is the time to do it. So my art form is painting, for those who know me, and so that is what I'm going to do. Now I have to rig something up so you guys can see a better view, because you can't see my painting. So my painting is here, right? And I'm going to need to make sure that you can see what it is I'm doing. Going to turn this around so I can explain a little bit of my process. So here I have my wax-based paints, and they need to heat up. So while they are heating up, I have got my ventilation going, and this is the painting that we worked on last week as a group, I guess. While everyone was doing their thing, this is what I was working on. And so yeah, anyway, so today I'm going to transition this mixed media based painting into an encaustic finished one, meaning that it is now going to be finished with my beeswaxes. So I need to rig something up, and I'm just looking around my studio here for a good little rig so that I can get my camera above me. So what I did last week failed miserably in the middle of videotaping, and it caused a lot of problems for me. My giant hand, whoops. So this week I obviously want to do something a little bit different. Sorry if I'm making everybody a little bit sick there. Little Blair Witch action project for you. Alright, so yeah, my rig last week did not work at all, and I had used my taxidermied rat as a pedestal, and the microphone, because I tugged on the microphone, the whole thing came toppling down, and it sort of ruined the beautiful finish on my rat because he fell in the wax, but also my viewers weren't able to really see much of what was going on. So I have one box on the right, and now I just need something on the left, and then we should be good to go. One sec, kids. Don't forget, you guys are getting your own self set up, right, to make art. So while I'm doing this setup time, you should be doing the same. Go dig out whatever it is you find creative, and we'll get crafting and making art and getting creative together. Okay, one sec. I don't know that we're going to be able to get this much better than this today. Hopefully it works. Hi, Violetta. Everybody being creative? Everyone had a creative weekend? Find time to do something that keeps your creativity high. Oh, we have White Horse, we have the Okanagan, we have all kinds of joiners today. I know it's been a lot colder where you guys are, so it's the time, all right. Okay, now I'm going to plug in my encaustic iron. So that's what I'm working on here today. So now I can get talking to you guys about creativity a little bit. I read something really interesting this morning that I thought I would share with you. And it's a belief that I think I've always held. I've just never really articulated that well. people always say to me, oh, you make it look so easy. And I thought I would just clarify that, because making something look easy is only good if you have the skill to make it look easy. We're not, in this open studio, we're not here to preach skill, right? We're here to talk to you about creativity. And creativity is something that is very separate from skill. So, like some of you that I know are watching, actually a lot of you that are watching, are super skilled at what you could do. So I couldn't make what you do look easy. I have to make what I do look easy, because this is the only thing I know how to make. Hi, Ju. This is the only thing I know how to make. So, well, maybe not the only thing, but this is where my skill set lies, right? Is transitioning a mixed media painting into an encaustic painting. So, the difference between skill and creativity really hits home when I realized that the purpose of these videos that I'm making with you guys is to encourage creativity. Now, I answer a lot of questions on my process because I believe that, you know, maybe it'll help you, but what is really going to help for anybody who's into mixed media and encaustic, what it might help you is give you some new tools or some new tools of creativity, but it's not going to actually give you the skill set. What's going to give you the skill set is the practice. So I've said it a million times, and it's not that practice makes perfect, but practice makes you perfect at the skill set you are going to achieve by the end of practicing your skill set, right? So, and in that, follow me along here, because I know this is a long-winded sentence and it just seems to be never-ending. But in that, you are going to develop your own skill set within the parameters of the art. Creativity, however, comes, I believe, when you're actually in the throes of the practice of learning the skill set. Okay, so in my blog post about on my website that I've written about creativity, what I'm actually talking about is being able to grasp that ideas that seem to come out of nowhere, those ideas that seem to be coming from the outside rather than from our own heads or our own egos, or from our own the words of our instructors or teachers, or that of somebody on YouTube that you just learned a new trick from. It's all about developing your skill set, but in the practicing of developing your skill set, you are welcoming in creativity, which will give you hints and clues as to what is unique to you, right? Hi, Nikki. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Here in Ottawa, it's been in a weird little weather pattern. We've had one day sun, one day rain, one day sun, one day rain. So today we're in a sunny day, and I'm actually thinking that the weather is like tomorrow. They're predicting 2 days of sun, so tomorrow should be sunny as well, which is just a bit crazy, it seems. But welcome at the same time, because when you're in self-isolation and stuff like that, we have to drum up a lot of good feelings, and a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Inspiration, and a lot of diligence, a lot of stick-to-itness to try to stay creative, and I don't even want to say stay positive, because I have to say even I don't have you know, every moment of my day isn't totally positive necessarily. I go through the same feelings and emotions and maybe worries and troubles as everybody. But the one thing that I find is definitely an escape. It's like a vacation. It's when I allow myself the creative time. So That is the purpose of these open studios, is not as a how-to for you to learn how to do mixed media and encaustic, although I'm happy to share anything as I go along. But it is meant, Heather says, wow, what you are doing right now is new to me. Cool. So Heather, this is a technique that I have developed. And like I said, I don't mind sharing anything. So if you do have questions, fire them away. So this is a technique that I do when I want the wax, my encaustic medium, to be as pure and as white as possible. So wax, as you know, the encaustic medium, when we heat it up, and if we heat it up too fast, or if we heat it up too much, or whatever, it tends to take on an amber color, a yellow color. Even if you've bought the bleached beeswax and the pharmaceutical grade beeswax, when you heat it up, it can actually go very amber, very yellow very quickly. So I have just developed this technique for taking my little pellets, my little beeswax pellets, and this is the Damar resin in a 5:1 ratio. Somebody asked me the other day where I bought this. Kama is a Canadian distributor for these encaustic pellets, and you can buy them in amber color, which is the natural, or you can buy the bleached. So this is the bleached, and they're fairly white, and I want my painting to be as clear, as natural, or not natural, I just said, that's a bad word, sorry. I want this to look as clear or as white as possible. So what I'm doing is I'm actually just sprinkling the pellets directly over the surface, and then I set my iron to low, and then it's a bit of a process because it's slow. As you know, these irons cycle through so that it never heats up too much. But what I'm actually doing is I'm just ironing the pellets directly onto the surface so that I can avoid having to heat it, then transfer it, then heat it again. Every time I heat it and transfer it, the oxidation happens, or oxidization happens, and it encourages more yellowing. So the clearer I want my medium to be, then I just iron the pellets directly on. So I think anybody, I always say that if you watch 30 encaustic artists paint a painting, you would learn 30 different techniques for achieving the exact same thing. So encaustic artists are really a bit renegade in that, because this is not a medium that has been around. I mean, it's ancient, but it's only been brought back. And because it's not regulated at a university level, it really doesn't have the same parameters or instruction book that goes with other fine artist materials. So a lot of encaustic artists, basically they know, once they know the principles and understandings of the basics of encaustic, then they're able to learn and develop a skill set that a lot of times becomes uniquely their own. So that's where my book Two Worlds Collide came from, is that I was primarily a mixed media artist, and then I was super disheartened to go to R&F, where they manufacture the encaustic medium paints, and I was super discouraged to find out that it wasn't two mediums that were compatible, because the wax will eventually hey Rochelle, the wax will eventually be repelled by the acrylic nature, and it's not acrylic itself that's repelled by, it's the nature of the acrylic. So acrylic is plastic, and wax initially might stick to your plastic, but eventually will be repelled by it. So yeah, so this process seems new to you. It's only because it's one that I kind of developed on the spot to avoid my yellowing of my wax, because a lot of times I love to paint with white, and white chalk paints, white mineral based paints, white clay paints. And what I often find is that as soon as I put the natural wax on top of it, it turns yellow and almost dirty looking. So then I tried pan pastels and going back over top of the wax and trying everything in my power to make it get back to a white surface. So then I just thought, well, what if I iron the pellets right in place? And sure enough, if I don't heat up my wax too much, it seems to be the trick. Now, like I told you, it's also, hi Anne, it's also Cleopatra. I don't get the comparison. Tell me, do tell me. So yeah, so this is just one way that I've developed a way of making something. Maybe I don't know enough about Cleopatra to know what it is you're referring to. Or is this an inside joke that we have that I've forgotten somehow? Anyway, so for those of you in caustic artists, give it a try. You'll see that it's not fast. You're not saving any time. You are only saving the yellow from happening. Hi Karen. You're only saving the yellow, preventing the yellow from taking over your paintings. So also the other thing it helps me with is I don't do complete waxes. I do spot waxing. So I generally do a lot of medium in some spots. Some spots are completely left bare and natural, so that you can still see the scratches and see the surface and see the torn paper and see all those bits and pieces. I actually love that. So my process, like I said, is not to cover the whole thing. That's not my goal. My goal is just to put a little wax here, little wax there, and so ironing it in place certainly works for me. I'm going to flip this around so that I can get the top. Oh, you're funny, Anne. By the way, it's so nice to connect with everybody that I haven't seen either in a long time or connect with in a long time. It's great to have everybody here, even though we can't interact because Facebook Live does not allow for that. I'm still loving these comments. I'm still loving that I'm encouraging everyone to be creative. I'm loving the response to the pictures and things that people have been posting of what kind of artistic trouble they've been getting into. Love all this stuff. I just heard the door to the studio open. Might be Amanda. Hi. It is Amanda. So I know some of you know Amanda as well, and she's like me. The two of us just can't get enough of this creativity, this need to create in a time when there's so much uncertainty. The one thing you can rely on is that when you allow time to play with your creative muses and with all the supplies and materials that you have going for you in your studios, that the time will fly, the time will pass. And I almost hate to say this, and dare I even say this, but when all this is over and we're allowed to go out again, I think I'm going to miss the pace of coming into the studio every day, doing live video with you guys, being all creative and chatty, and not really having much of a routine outside of that. Yeah, I'm trying to eat less, like probably a lot of you, because I don't know how you guys feel, but I could just get totally fat in this quarantine thing if I allowed myself to, between all the yummy treats and all the baking you could do and all the things that people keep posting on Instagram, and I'm like, damn, that looks good. And then I'm looking at my pile of vegetables and grilled chicken that I'm about to have, and I feel suddenly disappointed by my healthy meal choices. So yeah, so I'm just trying to find a balance in that and eat what I want but less often. So how are you guys coping with food? That's another interesting thing, right? If those of you who don't use food as like a method to cope with your boredom or fatigue or confusion or frustration or whatever it is we use food for, then you may want to skip this part of the discussion, because it is really challenging to me. I find not being able to get out and stuff like that, a bit frustrating at times. So I think, oh, I'll just go to the fridge and have a cupcake, right? So what does Anne say? What will you need more when this is over? AA. Yeah. Those are going to be two really necessary businesses for sure, right? Good Lord, this is definitely playing with all sorts of temptations and addictions and coping mechanisms that we don't often have to call upon. But yeah, so true. All right, so now is the time also, guys, when you're going to tell me about your food, but you're also going to tell me about what it is you're creating. So I know Anne sews, I know Anne paints, I know Anne finds creative outlets all the time. So Anne, tell me what it is you're doing to stay creative in this time. And anyone else is, Jen says AA for sure. Yeah, it's funny because if anybody orders wine, so we found out, like when we heard about business closed down and lockdown, we ordered a case of wine. In addition, we thought just for safe measure, we should probably go to the liquor store and buy some wine. And so we stocked up, and then it was funny because the wine took like 10 days to come in what's supposed to be an overnight delivery. And I had to laugh because I found myself like developing a bit of anxiety about this case of wine. I'm like, well, they haven't said shipped yet, so do you think it got lost? Do you think it ever like left do you think maybe that, and it was funny because I actually was like spitting out of control about a case of wine, which I had to laugh at. Oh yes, Jan says, when you're in the wine capital, she's from the Okanagan, you don't need to worry about such things. Well, I tell you, in Ontario, there was a slight panic there for a moment when it took 10 days for an overnight delivery of a case of wine. So it is, do you guys have fruit yet, Jen? Or is it still too early, even in the Okanagan, for fruit? Like you have early grapes or anything like that? No, it's only April, but I don't know. It's a good question, right? We all want to know if Jen has grapes already or some type of fruit that they can produce wine from in the Okanagan. Okay, so I've waxed enough clear on here. And now I'm going to go over to my other wax, and it's not quite ready. So what I'll do in the meantime is maybe for those of you who were watching that for the first time, the white beads, maybe I'll show you another technique. So why not? I don't usually do this. Just getting blooms on the cherry trees. Oh, I love cherries. That's not something that grows easily in Ontario, so, or at least where we are in Ontario. We've had 2 cherry trees that we've been babying and nurturing and shielding from the elements and trying to get them to cooperate as fruit trees in our climate, but they've all died. So one of them I think lived for 7 or 8 years, but it didn't make it. So early fruit in the end of May, and grapes are in the fall with the apples. Oh, good to know. Good to know. Okay, so anyway, so what I might do is I might do a bit of a patina. So a patina is when we do, so similar to the scratchings that I did earlier, I'm just going to do a bit of scratching into the clear wax, and within those scratches in the clear wax, I'll be able to apply a contrasting paint, an oil paint, that will produce like a groove where the paint can stay in there. And so it's almost like a stain, but the stain is actually deposited right into one particular area. So patina is not exclusive to encaustic painting. A patina can be done in many different mediums, but using different materials. What am I taking off? So I'm not taking anything off, what I'm actually doing is I'm just scraping into the wax to create like a groove. And then I'm going to take some oil paint and I'm going to do the patina. So what I'll do is I'll bring the camera in closer and then you guys can watch as I'm doing this. Let me flip that around. So within the clear wax, I've just scratched in a few grooves. So I'll use a contrasting color paint so that you'll be able to see what it is I'm doing. My paints have been drying up because I haven't been taking care of them very well. So let me see if I can find one that will cooperate. Oh, there we go. Okay, so there's a bit of raw umber. So I'm going to take that raw umber paint and I'm going to put it like right into those grooves. So I'll just do it in this one area. And whereas it looks a mess right now, I have to make sure that that paint actually gets right into those grooves. Because now I'm going to use some vegetable oil, which is all the way on the other side of the table, but I will grab it. So I'm going to take some vegetable oil and I'm just going to put it on top. And then using a clean spot on the rag, I'm going to dissolve that oil paint. And what it did was it managed to stay in all the grooves and the gouges that I just created. So earlier, the scratches that I created in the bottom surface and then top coated, that sits a little deeper in this painting, but these are like really prominent because I was able to apply that color really. You're scratching something off before you did the grooves. Was it a piece of paper? Oh, I see. Yeah, so actually down here, what it was I had this little bump that just looked like dirt and I couldn't tell what it was, so I thought what I would do was just scratch it off, but it actually went down to a deeper layer and I have this little pink spot, so which I don't mind. Like, there's now a pink spot. Yeah, so a lot of people will do these, Heather, with the pigment sticks. So RNF makes pigment sticks, Kama makes pigment sticks, lots of people make pigment sticks. I just happened to grab a bit of oil paint. So it's the exact same thing, exact same process. I'm going to add a few more scratches now here and there, only for a bit of continuity. And then I'll take the same brown and I'll put a little up here and I'll put a little over here and then I'll put a little down here. So yeah, so pigment sticks and oil paints work somewhat similarly in this situation. So you might not find that they're similar in every application, but certainly in doing a patina, it is the same. So I'm going to just distribute this around, right? Give it let it stain a little bit, let it add a bit of depth. But you can see it adds to the confusion if you leave too much of it on in this painting because I already have so much going on underneath. So I'm always a little reluctant. I'm just going to add a little bit to the natural grooves and falls of the wax down here. Again, just for a bit of continuity so it doesn't look entirely like it's just in one spot on the painting. And then now I find a clean spot on a paper towel or just a clean paper towel in general. And I'm going to add a little more vegetable oil to loosen this all up. And then my job is to go in, loosen the oil paint up. And then you can see my rag is pretty dirty, right? So if I don't find a clean spot on this rag, then I'm just going to keep spreading this around and then it'll never be fully off. So when I find a clean spot on the rag, I can go back in, and I find that it's not removing as much as I want. Then I can add a little more vegetable oil, but I would actually add it to a clean spot on your rag. So let me demonstrate that. So if I have a different rag here, I'm going to add a little bit of vegetable oil to it, and then I'll go back in and I'll be able to remove even more without fear of spreading it around. So you can see, like, it just deposits a little bit, like here and there, so I'm not having to create gouges everywhere for continuity. That was just in the areas that I did around. So I'm going to put this back. Hi, Ariel. Hope you're staying creative. Okay, I'm going to put this back into here. Turn that back on to painting surface. There we go. Okay, so back to this painting. So I'm going to see if my white will cooperate yet. It's starting to get there. But, oh yeah, so now that I've done that, I have to fuse that. Oh, and I forgot my torch. Or did I? Yes, I did. I'm going to grab my torch, because if I were to use a heat gun at this point, you guys wouldn't be able to hear me very well. It would be very noisy. So I'm just going to grab that, and I'll be right back. Amanda's so funny, she told me I should have just put it on commercial break. So if anybody knows how to pipe in some commercials at this time, that would be ideal timing. Alright, so now that I have my torch, I'm going to go in and I'm going to fuse that oil paint that I just put in there. So the question came up last time, am I not going to fuse the wax that I ironed? So the wax actually, or the iron actually did the fusing. Can you tilt the camera down a wee bit? Let's see. Let's see what we can do here. Whoops. If you guys saw how precarious this was, like, it's so funny, because it is absolutely not a tripod. It is a business card holder perched on a rag and just tilted forward. Yeah, so I've got a crazy thing going on. So yeah, is that any better? I hope so. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fuse this surface now, because like I mentioned before, the iron, because of the temperature of the iron melting the wax, it fused the wax. So now I'm just going to go in with my torch, and I'm going to fuse the patina, the oil paint, into the surface. If we don't fuse it, then eventually it will dry, because it is an oil paint. It does take a lot longer to dry because it is an oil paint. But the other thing is, if I decide to go in here and apply anything else, like a pen pastel or anything like that, as long as there's wet oil or an oil slick on the surface, it won't actually accept it. So I have to make sure that whatever it is I do on top of this wax, even if it is compatible with wax, it needs to be fused properly. So I'm just going in now, fusing the oil paint into my already fused surface. For those of you who do any encaustic, this is probably the part where I find I could just get lost in the process, is watching that wax melt and mix together with other colors and see what happens. And even though you see, hi Ann, even though you see more of the background coming through, some of it can be exciting, some of it can look really, dirty or translucent, and maybe that's what you weren't going for. But for me, what I find really exciting about that part of encaustic is that there's plenty of room for me to respond in that, right? So when something great happens or something bad happens, I have two choices. Well, really one choice is to respond or to leave it, I suppose. And responding, if it's really great, I can do more of that. I can enhance it. I can make that like, ooh, one of my new favorite things I'm going to do all the time. Or if it happens to be something that I didn't like so much, then I have to figure out how I'm going to fix it. So either way, I know a lot of artists like the term happy accidents, so we'll go with that for now. I'm not a real huge fan of the term, only because I don't really believe that when you are developing your skill set as an artist, that we are actually in a position of making mistakes or that there's accidents. I mean, we're learning, yes, but at the same time, like, it's not life-threatening, it's not hazardous to your health, like it's not really affecting you in any other way other than your painting went in a different direction than you had intended. So yeah, that's my little speech on happy accidents. I don't really believe in them, not because I don't believe in accidents. I just don't believe that in making art that there's a lot of room for accidents. So like if I set this room on fire with my torch or whatever, then that would be an accident, which, knock on wood, that was not going to be part of my presentation every day. But in art, it's not really an accident if I'm just painting and learning as I go and responding to my creativity and developing a painting. So no one is ever going to look at my painting and say, can you point out all the accidents? Because there are no accidents, like nothing bad happened. So an accident did happen in the studio the other day, which I can show you. So let me put this here. So this is my little taxidermied rat. So I take courses in everything, right? And this course was doing a self-portrait. And he actually is real, and he's adorable now, because I would have to tell you, I would never be a rat lover before. And now I look at him in an entirely different way. Like, now I have an entirely different perception of rats. I'm not scared of them. Now, mind you, like, if one ran across my basement floor, I might be completely startled. But the reality is, like, he's just really sweet and maybe a little misunderstood, because apparently they're super smart. And anyway, as a taxidermied little friend in my studio riding the bicycle, it is, now this poor little sad guy on the back was also my attempt at felting, and his tail fell off and everything. Anyway, so what happened in my tragic accident was, because of the weight of the base plate that I made, I tried to use it as my my tripod, and so I had the camera suspended above this painting using the weight of this, and then my microphone, I guess I tugged on it too much and I toppled the whole thing down. And then my poor little mouse took the brunt of it. He now has a cut on his arm, he has a cut on his leg, and he's covered in encaustic wax. So he's got some green and some blue and everything else on him. And then the poor little felted mouse that was going along for a ride, or felted rat that was going along for a ride, he just fell right off and took a beating. But all in all, so that was an accident, but all in all, no one really got hurt. So yeah, it was all okay. It did create a massive hole in one of my paintings, but because I'm working on wood, it just poked right through, and I was able to just put a little piece of paper over it and throw some wax over it, and no one was the wiser. So I'll get this little guy out of the way. And so yeah, so some of you can relate to that accident thing, right? Like, it's not really an accident if you're just creating as you go. So I believe my white might be ready. So I'm going to thin it out a little bit. This is something my friend Andrea calls skim milk. So she takes a white encaustic medium and then she adds a lot of clear to it. And so when I apply it, I end up with a thinner white that still allows me to see through to the background, as opposed to a heavy cream, right? So she calls it skim milk because it looks the same color as like a glass of milk, except, well, relatively, but when you apply it on something, you're able to see through it. So I'm just going to make up a little skim milk here. And unfortunately, there's no real fast way to heat up your wax without causing it to burn or turn yellow. And we can't do that because it can be toxic if it starts to smoke. Some people have heard that encaustic wax or encaustic wax and medium is highly toxic, but it's only in the way in which it's contained, heated, and worked with. So it's entirely safe if it's always kept at the right temperature and at a low enough temperature. And so for that very reason, we can't speed up the melting process too quickly. So yes, we have great ventilation here, but at the same time, we gotta keep everybody safe in here. So I'm going to use what I have and just start with that. So the reason I'm going to add some white wax back over top of this is that a lot of the wax, like I was talking about earlier, a lot of the wax can really magnify what's going on underneath because the wax is so clear. If you put it on really thick, it'll make what's beneath it quite foggy. But if you've got a lot of scratches and texture and sort of dirty patina marks and things like that, like I've got going on in my paintings, then what's going on underneath gets magnified by the wax. And so that can actually be quite repelling, really, because repulsive, I should say, because it actually looks just like dirt. So yeah, in order to make a nice balance between the grunge and the appeal of a mixed media encaustic painting, I find I need to go back in with some colored wax and sort of touch that up a little bit. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm waiting for my wax to warm up, but I do have a little bit of like a creamy white that is ready. So I'm going to start with that and fuse that in. So somebody asked me the other day why I need to put wax on my paintings, and I don't. That's just my process. So when I say I'm a mixed media and encaustic artist, it's not necessarily true. At the end of the day, I label my paintings all as mixed media, and that's only because the encaustic is more like a finishing, but it's just really one layer that sits on top of my artwork. So I love the texture also that a little layer of colored wax can create. The clear wax creates a lot of texture as well, but it's not as evident because when I do the fusing, I have to fuse it so that the wax melts into the surface. I kind of need a full fuse the first time in order for it to be really stable. And that's because I'm selling my paintings and I don't want somebody in 15 years to say, how come this painting's falling apart? So I'm adding my white, and now I'm going to fuse it, but I don't have to do a full fuse. Now I just need to melt it enough that it's going to meld with the wax below. And so what we're looking for in terms of how we know it's fused is it's called making the wax sweat. And what that means is you just want the wax to look like a little bit wet, right? Like just a teeny bit wet. It doesn't need to be a full melt. That's funny. I just had a burn because I fused a spot where I didn't actually have wax. So it just burnt the paper that was beneath. So I'll show you that afterwards. Again, see, if I were to call that an accident, right, then I'm slightly being an alarmist here because nothing really bad happened. It's just something that I either have to deal with or leave. So that's my little rant on happy accident. Okay. Now, the other beauty about having the clear wax underneath, for me, is that I've created what I call a barrier wax. So, because I have a barrier wax there, if I have some white that I've just put on that I don't like, because I have a razor blade, I can just scrape back down, or using any tool really, I can scrape back down to the clear layer, which is just protecting or encapsulating the layers below. So it's somewhat a bit of like an insurance policy for me that I can always go back to the original by having sealed it in clear wax first. Hi, Colette. So I'm seeing some people join me that haven't been into the studio here before. So what it is we're doing in these studios, a little catch up for those of you who are new, wondering what the heck I'm doing. Not doing instructional videos. What I'm doing in this time is I have committed to 1 hour a day of open studio, and that is my time to encourage people to do whatever it is that you do to make you creative. So I know Colette's a fantastic potter, and I'm sure she's keeping super busy with pottery right now. It's really important that we find time in all this craziness and weirdness to do things that help us connect to that part of us that makes us joyful and relaxed, and for me that's found in creativity. So we've been talking about all different forms of creativity. A lot of us are cooking, a lot of us are painting, a lot of us some people are writing poetry. There's all kinds of creative measures going on out there, and I mean, I'm sure everybody does like 10 different things a day that you would put into the realm of creativity. But I'm encouraging people to everywhere to dedicate an hour every day to that which makes you feel creative, and that which makes you feel happy, and that which allows you to connect to a different time and place than we're experiencing right now, because there's a lot of weird newness about what we're dealing with right now, a lot of uncertainty. For me, I know one way that I absolutely can connect with myself is when I dedicate some time to being creative. So the world hasn't really stopped, obviously. So I'm not going to comment on that, but I do find myself using it a bit as an excuse every once in a while. I'm like, yeah, you know what, everything's on pause right now anyway, so I don't actually have to work, or I don't actually have to pay that bill, or I don't actually have to fulfill that obligation. And that may be the truth for like a major apocalypse or something where the world collapses, but right now I do have to put it in perspective that we are just kind of on a pause right now, trying to prevent the spread. So it's not really a hall pass to just go all hog wild and sit around and do nothing all day every day. So for that measure, I have decided to discipline myself to 1 hour every day in front of you all to just encourage you to be creative. Pull out your art supplies, pull out your journals, put out your your whatever it is you find creative, and just spend at least an hour a day. So whether or not it's in tune with this live video, you can always watch the replays. It's too late to start. You can start at any time. In fact, I've just gone ahead and I've uploaded them all to YouTube for you, so that they will be available even for people who don't have Facebook. So that has been uploaded on the weekend, thanks to my darling husband who helped me make that possible. Again, it was one of those things I'm like, oh, it's another job to be done. And it's not that it wasn't important, it's just that I'm finding it hard to prioritize things when I feel like every day is vacation. I do have to keep it in perspective though. We're not really on vacation. We are just pressing pause for a little bit from going out and about. So, yeah. There are those of us who are treating this like it is vacation. So it's kind of funny, really. All right, so my white is good now. The first layer of white that I've put on is, thank you, Anne. Yes, I do see it as a bit of a pause. And yeah, in the measures that we've taken to prevent, here we go, right? Soapbox time. In the measure we've taken to prevent the spread, I know if you watch the news, is it enough? Is it not enough? Is it whatever? The reality is, we all have pressed pause quite a bit, and I'm sure even those who are breaking rules and everything else, they're still probably to some degree contributing to the pause. And for that, we just have to wait and see what happens. So ride it out, as they say. Now, while I have you all as my captive audience, I'm going to tell you about another little thing that I've done on the weekend. And for those of you who are on my email list and or not on my email list, I'll be putting it on social media and everything else. I really do believe in I'll keep working while I'm talking, but I really do believe in the theory that every little bit helps, every little bit counts, and each and every one of us can make a difference, even in small ways. So an email came across my my desktop on the weekend, and it was from the Queensway Carleton Hospital in Ottawa, and they are setting up some, I'll answer your question in 1 second, Nikki. So they're setting up temporary COVID clinics, and they're also looking desperately for emergency ways to purchase ventilators and things like that for our hospital. And it got me thinking about how artists, even though maybe we're not considered, the most lucrative profession in the world, and anyway, the email came to me asking me if I could figure out, or if I could donate some money. And I really wanted to, but the reality is for me, I'm not teaching, I'm not working, I'm not selling anything, and I thought, what can I do? So I have actually secured a printing partnership with someone to be able to get professional level prints done of these two paintings that I did for this fundraiser. And what I'm doing is I'm taking all the proceeds from these prints and donating it to the hospital. So that made me think, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can always think of ways to help your own community, to think of people in your own community without having to stretch beyond your means. So what I'm doing is I'm starting this venture with these prints. It will be launched this afternoon. It will close Thursday night at midnight because the hospital needs the money ASAP. So everything on my website will be half price. No, sorry, it'll be full price. Half the price or 50% of everything will go to the hospital. And with this special print that we're doing, it's just on cost recovery altogether. So every bit of the proceeds after we've paid costs will go directly to the hospital, and anything over $100, we are working with the hospital to make sure you get a tax receipt for it. So that's my little contribution. You'll all be receiving that later on, either in an email or on my social media. So if it affects you in any way, or you feel like you can find some way to contribute, it's not a huge donation. The prints are selling for $80, and we're thinking at this point about $50 of that, once we're paid all our costs, will go to the hospital. So all right, so let me get back to that, because you will see that later in my feed and also in an email. And if you want to know how you can do more in your own community, there are tons of ways. You just have to ask, and someone will tell you who's collecting money or whatever is needed. Okay, so Nikki says to me, so one can mix or fuse wax with oil and chalk, just nothing acrylic based, correct? Okay, so let's back up here. So I start my paintings with anything devoid of acrylic or latex. So what that means is I start my paintings with collage, glue, paints. Everything has, or is devoid of, does not have acrylic or latex in it. If it does have a little, like the glue or something like that, then, thanks Anne, if it does, then what it's actually the properties of that. So for instance, I use a material called Liquitex Clear Gesso, and when the Liquitex Clear Gesso dries, I use that for deglazing or taking the gloss off of something shiny, like a shiny picture or something like that. It actually feels like sandpaper when it's dry. So it's because it's got particles in it that are making it absorbent, like it has an absorbent surface. When you put the wax on, even though it's acrylic base, it has enough little grooves that the wax has some place to settle and to really fuse to. So that's my base layer. So if you want to talk about base layer, before I move into encaustic, I make sure that the whole painting is completely matte, M-A-T-T-E, and it has no shine in it whatsoever, which is often found in wallpaper paints and chalk paints and clay-based paints, things like that. So I'm very careful not to put any Mod Podge or anything like directly on the surface where I'm expecting wax to stick. If I do have a little area where that's happened, then I will actually deglaze that, usually with a little bit of the Liquitex Clear Gesso that we talked about. And then once it's completely dry, like mine was today, then I go into wax. So if I had an area, a little area of acrylic on here, or if, let's say you paint a whole painting in acrylic, if you go ahead and put wax on it, like I get that question a lot. I have a painting that I painted years ago. I want to make it an encaustic painting. Can I just put Liquitex Clear Gesso on it and then put my wax on top? The answer is, of course you can. You can do anything you want. But is that going to be stable? I'm going to bet not. And the reason is that if it gets moved or hit or cold, or I have a little story about that, but I'm sure some of you are saying, of course you do. I have a little story about everything. But if that painting gets transported or falls off a wall or something happens, that wax is not stable sitting on top of that acrylic. And so what will happen is it will peel off or chip off. The wax actually doesn't, or the encaustic, oh my goodness, the acrylic doesn't have the properties to hold on to, it's not porous enough to hold on to the wax. So just by putting a bit of gesso on top of it and then covering the whole thing in wax, I would say if it's less than like maybe like 8 by 8, 10 by 10, maybe I would chance it. But I'm not sure for anything bigger than that I would be relying on that little bit of grittiness to hold that much wax. So my story was I had sold these 4 paintings a hospital, believe it or not. I had a show in a hospital waiting room, and I had all my paintings there, and it was like January when I was doing deliveries, because the show went until just after New Year's. So I was making my deliveries, and it was one of those bitter cold nights. Like, if it wasn't 35 below with a wind chill of like minus 45, I don't know. Like, it was really, really cold. And I was taking the paintings from the hospital to the car to someone's house. Hi, Laura. And as I did that, I could hear this eerie crackling sound, and I thought, what is that? And all of a sudden I realized it was coming from the trunk of my car. The paintings were cracking, and I thought it heard, like, for those of you familiar with Canadian winters, it felt like, and it sounded like you know, the ice you're walking on you're on thin ice. It started to do that really weird cracking sound. Yet it was coming out of my trunk, and I knew that there was nothing in there that could be cracking except for my paintings. So I didn't do anything but like close the trunk up really fast, put the heat on, drive to the lady's house, and I told her what happened. And so I said, don't open them just yet. I said, but if tomorrow you open it up and it's like, you know, all kinds of crumbs in the bottom of your of the packaging, let me know and I'll replace the paintings, or I'll give you your money back, and that'll be the end of that. And I would have learned my lesson. But because I had a stable foundation underneath my painting, what had happened, she opened them up and she said, no, they seem perfectly fine. So I'm like, fantastic. So that was great. 3 years later, she calls me and she says, we moved one of the paintings. And hi, Irene. And she said, we moved one of the paintings. And I said, and what happened? She said, when we moved it, she said, we noticed this weird crack developing, and then it just like a windshield, like spiderweb cracks. The whole thing started to crack. And so I said, don't touch it. I'll come and pick it up and see what I can do. And so I brought it, and what I did was I actually heated up my griddle and laid the painting on top. So I let the heat come from underneath and just warm the painting and refuse the whole thing. All the cracks disappeared. Like, I wasn't top melting or top surface anything. There is a bright side to this story, and it will end, I promise. The painting was fine because I let it warm up that way, and then I moved it aside and let it cool down naturally. And I was able to save that painting, but it taught me a lot about building our houses right on unstable foundations. So I firmly believe that had I started that painting with acrylic and glue and gesso and things like that, that when she moved that painting and these cracks would have happened, that I think it probably would have been a lot worse. It would have just fallen off into a pile on the floor. So, and I wouldn't have been able to save the painting the way that I did. So be careful of those shaky foundations, kids. It's really important, if you are going to be following my Two Worlds Collide method, that you really make sure your foundations are solid and are firm, because that is what everything is going to be based on. So I'm going to keep working on this for a little bit, and then tomorrow I'll probably show you the end result, because I'll be done. Like I said, for those of you who are, I just noticed that Irene she said she found me, so I'm assuming that you haven't been watching. Good news, you can go back and watch all these, and even if you're not watching on Facebook, you can share them with other people, because you can go to my new YouTube channel. It's set up. I think it's probably, I hope, I didn't set it up, my husband did. I hope it's under my name. But it is a YouTube channel, and it's just these videos for now. I hope to be providing you with lots more in weeks to come and in years to come, and hopefully we keep creating together for a very long time. So I have no idea what time it is here. Amanda, do you know the time?
Yes, hang on.
I guess. Oh, look I'm way over time. Sorry, guys. So anyway, thank you. So yes, so I'm going to sign off for today. I'm going to keep working on this for a little bit, and then I thought maybe I'm going to do this fundraiser now, so all of you just pay attention for that. If it's not something you feel like speaks to you for helping out the hospital in Ottawa, then maybe it's something that might inspire you to do something across your channels with your art. So watch for that, and later on in the week, I think maybe Thursday or Friday, probably Friday, why don't we plan a project together? So I think that way, if we do a little sing-along kind of thing, a little project together, then I'll be able to answer questions step by step, and that way we'll all be on the same page. So I do start at noon. Thank you, Linda. Noon every day, noon to 1, is live on Facebook, but of course you can watch the replay anytime on Facebook, and now you can go to my YouTube channel and watch them anytime you want. All right, bye everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.